The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the Silver Creek Saloon, just as the first snowflakes began to drift down from the iron-gray sky, and Dahlia Vaughn pressed her gloved hand against the frosted window, wondering if she had made the worst mistake of her life coming all the way to Independence, California, in December of 1876. She had received the telegram 3 weeks ago while working as a seamstress in Sacramento. Her cousin Alina had fallen ill with consumption and needed someone to take over her position as the new schoolteacher in Independence, a remote mining town nestled in the eastern Sierra Nevada. The pay was decent, room and board included, and Dahlia had jumped at the chance to escape the suffocating confines of her aunt's boarding house, where she had lived since her parents died 2 years prior. At 22 years old, she felt her life slipping away one stitch at a time, her hands growing raw from endless needlework, her dreams of adventure fading with each passing day. Now, stepping down from the stagecoach into the biting wind, she wondered if adventure was truly what she wanted after all. The town looked half-frozen, buildings huddled together as if for warmth, and the mountains loomed dark and ominous in the distance. Snow was already beginning to accumulate on the wooden sidewalks, and the few people she saw hurried past with their heads down against the wind. "Miss Vaughn," a voice cut through the howling wind, and she turned to see a man approaching from the direction of the saloon. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a heavy sheepskin coat and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. As he drew closer, she could make out strong features, a dark beard and eyes the color of summer grass that seemed startlingly bright against the gray day. "Yes, I am Dahlia Vaughn," she said, drawing her cloak tighter around herself. "Marcus Norwood," he said, touching the brim of his hat in greeting. "I run cattle up in the high country during the warmer months, but I help out in town when winter sets in. Alina mentioned you would be arriving today. I am sorry to say she passed 3 days ago." The words hit Dahlia like a physical blow. She had known Alina was ill, but she had not expected this. "I had no idea she was so close to the end." "It came on quick," Marcus said, his voice rough but kind. "Doc Henderson said sometimes consumption does that. She held on as long as she could, kept talking about how glad she was you were coming to help. The town council decided to keep you on as teacher anyway if you are willing. We need someone to educate the children." Dahlia nodded numbly, trying to process everything. She had come all this way to replace her cousin, and now Alina was gone entirely. The reality of her isolation hit her then, standing in a strange town where she knew no one, her only connection to this place buried in the frozen ground. "I will show you to the schoolhouse," Marcus said, reaching for her trunk. "You will be living in the quarters attached to it. It is not much, but it is warm and dry." She followed him through the snow, which was falling harder now, thick flakes that clung to her eyelashes and melted on her cheeks. The schoolhouse was a modest wooden structure at the edge of town, painted white with green shutters that rattled in the wind. Marcus pushed open the door and carried her trunk inside, setting it down in the small main room where rows of desks faced a blackboard at the front. "Your living space is through here," he said, leading her through a door at the back. The room beyond was indeed small, containing a narrow bed, a pot-bellied stove, a table with 2 chairs and a few shelves. But someone had laid a fire in the stove, and the space was blessedly warm. A vase of dried wildflowers sat on the table, and Dahlia felt her throat tighten. "Alina picked those last summer," Marcus said quietly. "She loved wildflowers. I thought you might want to keep them." "That is very kind," Dahlia managed, turning away to hide the tears that threatened to spill over. She was exhausted from travel, grieving a cousin she had not seen in years, and utterly overwhelmed by the magnitude of the change in her life. "I will let you get settled," Marcus said, moving toward the door. "If you need anything, I am staying at the boarding house on Main Street for the winter. Mrs. Patterson, who runs it, will know where to find me. School starts at 8 in the morning. The children are expecting you on Monday." "Thank you, Mr. Norwood." He paused at the door, looking back at her with an expression she could not quite read. "Welcome to Independence, Miss Vaughn. I know this is not how you expected things to be, but I think you will find it is a good town with good people." After he left, Dahlia sank down onto the bed and finally allowed herself to cry. She cried for Alina, for her parents, for the life she had left behind and the uncertain future that stretched before her. The wind howled outside and the snow piled higher against the windows, and she had never felt more alone in her life. But as the hours passed and the initial shock wore off, Dahlia began to unpack her trunk and make the small space her own. She arranged her few books on the shelves, hung her spare dress on a peg by the door, and set out the daguerreotype of her parents on the table beside the wildflowers. By the time darkness fell, she had made a simple supper from the supplies someone had thoughtfully left in the cupboard, and she felt marginally more human. She spent the weekend preparing for her first day of teaching, reviewing the lessons Alina had left behind and organizing the classroom. On Sunday evening, she ventured out to explore the town despite the continuing snow. Independence was larger than she had first thought, with a general store, a blacksmith, a doctor's office, 2 saloons, a hotel, and a small church at the far end of Main Street. She could see lights in many of the windows, and the sound of piano music drifted from one of the saloons. She was standing outside the church, debating whether to go in for evening services, when she heard boots crunching through the snow behind her. She turned to find Marcus Norwood approaching, dressed in clean clothes and a heavy coat, his beard neatly trimmed. "Evening, Miss Vaughn," he said. "Heading to services? I was considering it. Mind if I walk with you?" She nodded, and they fell into step together, climbing the steps to the church. Inside, the small building was warm and crowded with families. Dahlia felt the weight of curious stares as she entered, and she was grateful when Marcus guided her to a pew near the back. He introduced her quietly to the people nearby, and she tried to remember all the names that came at her in a rush. The service was simple and comforting, and afterward, several families approached to welcome her and promise to send their children to school in the morning. A woman named Sarah Mitchell, who had 3 children of school age, invited her to Sunday dinner the following week. By the time Dahlia walked back to the schoolhouse through the snow, she felt considerably less alone than she had upon her arrival. Marcus walked her home again, his presence steady and reassuring in the dark. "You did well tonight," he said as they reached her door. "I know it cannot be easy, walking into a whole new life like this." "It is daunting," she admitted, "but everyone has been very kind." "Alina talked about you often," he said. "She was looking forward to seeing you again. She said you were the adventurous one in the family, always reading books about far-off places and dreaming of seeing the world." Dahlia smiled sadly. "I suppose Independence is not exactly the exotic locale I used to imagine." "Maybe not," Marcus said, and there was something in his voice that made her look up at him. His green eyes were warm in the lamplight spilling from her window. "But there is beauty here too, if you are willing to see it. The mountains in summer are something special. Fields of wildflowers that go on for miles, streams so clear you can see every pebble on the bottom, and the sky at night full of more stars than you ever imagined existed. You love it here," she said. "I do. I came west 10 years ago from Ohio, looking for something I could not name. Found it here, found peace, I suppose, purpose." He shifted his weight, suddenly seeming uncomfortable. I should let you get your rest. Big day tomorrow. Thank you for walking with me, Mr. Norwood. Marcus, please. We are not formal people out here. Then you must call me Dahlia. He smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his whole face and touched his hat brim. Good night, Dahlia. She watched him walk away through the snow, a solid figure disappearing into the white darkness, and felt something shift in her chest. She told herself it was simply relief at finding a friendly face in this strange new place. But as she lay in bed that night listening to the wind, she found herself thinking about green eyes and strong hands and the way he had said her name. Monday morning arrived cold and bright, the storm having passed in the night to leave everything covered in a fresh blanket of white. Dahlia woke early, dressed in her best wool dress, and prepared the classroom. By 8 o'clock, children began arriving, stamping snow from their boots and eyeing her with open curiosity. There were 15 students in total, ranging in age from 6 to 14. She learned their names quickly. Sarah Mitchell's 3, including 12-year-old Emma, who had her mother's kind eyes. The Henderson twins, Bobby and Billy, who were 8 and full of mischief. Little Lucy Chen, whose father ran the general store, and 10 others who represented the diverse population of this mining town. Teaching came more naturally to Dahlia than she had expected. She had always loved books and learning, and she found she enjoyed sharing that love with the children. They were eager students for the most part, hungry for knowledge and stories of the wider world. She read to them from her own books, taught them mathematics and geography, and helped the younger ones with their letters. The days fell into a comfortable rhythm. She taught from 8 until 3, then spent her evenings preparing lessons and reading. Several times a week, families would invite her to dinner, and she began to form friendships with the women of the town. Sarah Mitchell became a particular friend, a warm-hearted woman of 35 who had come west with her husband to start a new life and never looked back. And then there was Marcus. He seemed to appear whenever she needed something. When the stove in the schoolhouse began smoking badly, he came to fix it. When she mentioned she was running low on firewood, a full cord appeared stacked neatly beside her door. When the wind tore a shutter loose during a storm, he was there the next morning with hammer and nails. "You do not have to keep doing this," she told him one afternoon in late December as he repaired a broken desk. "I am perfectly capable of managing on my own." "I know you are," he said, not looking up from his work. "But that does not mean you should have to. We take care of each other in independence. That is how small towns survive." "Is this how you treat everyone in town, or am I special?" The words came out more flirtatious than she had intended, and she felt her cheeks warm. He did look up then, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You are special," he said quietly. "You came through snow as a replacement for Alina, stepping into her shoes without hesitation, taking on responsibility for children you had never met in a town that was strange to you. A lot of people would have turned around and gone home. But you stayed. That takes courage." "Or desperation," she said, trying to lighten the moment. "I did not have much to go back to." "Still," he said, returning to his work, "you are no substitute, Dahlia. You are becoming something this town needs, something important. The children love you already. I hear them talking about Miss Vaughn this and Miss Vaughn that. Emma Mitchell told her mother you are the best teacher she ever had." Dahlia felt warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the stove. "That means a great deal to me." They fell silent, but it was a comfortable silence, broken only by the sound of his hammer and the ticking of the clock on the wall. When he finished, he gathered his tools and stood brushing sawdust from his pants. "Are you doing anything for Christmas?" he asked. "Sarah invited me to spend the day with her family." "That is good. Sarah will take care of you." He hesitated, then added, "There is a dance at the church on Christmas Eve. Nothing fancy, just fiddle music and good company. Would you like to go? With me, I mean, if you want to." Her heart leaped. "I would like that very much." His face broke into that transforming smile. "I will pick you up at 7. Christmas Eve arrived with clear skies and bitter cold. Dahlia spent the day with the children, hosting a small party with cookies and songs. The students gave her small handmade gifts: a drawing from Lucy Chen, a carved wooden bookmark from Bobby Henderson, a wreath of pine cones and dried berries from Emma Mitchell. She was deeply touched, feeling for the first time that she truly belonged here. That evening, she dressed carefully in her best dress, a deep blue wool that brought out the color of her eyes. She pinned her dark hair up and allowed a few curls to frame her face. When Marcus knocked on her door at 7, she opened it to find him standing in the snow wearing a suit she suspected he reserved for special occasions. He looked handsome and slightly uncomfortable, tugging at his collar. "You look beautiful," he said, and the sincerity in his voice made her blush. "You look very handsome yourself." The church was warm and crowded, decorated with evergreen boughs and candles. Someone had pushed the pews back to create a dance floor, and a trio of musicians were tuning their instruments in the corner. The whole town seemed to have turned out, dressed in their finest, ready to celebrate. Marcus was an excellent dancer, guiding her through reels and waltzes with confident ease. Between dances, they talked and laughed, sharing stories of their childhoods and their dreams. She learned that he had grown up on a farm in Ohio, the youngest of 5 children, and had come west at 18 seeking adventure and independence. He had worked as a ranch hand, a prospector, and finally had saved enough to start his own small cattle operation in the mountains above Independence. "It is not much yet," he said as they stood by the refreshment table catching their breath. "Just 100 head and a cabin that barely deserves the name, but it is mine, and every year it grows a little. In another few years I will have something substantial, something to be proud of." "You should already be proud," Dahlia said. "You built it yourself from nothing. That is remarkable." "What about you?" he asked. "What are your dreams, Dahlia?" She considered the question carefully. A month ago, she would have said she dreamed of escape, of exotic places and grand adventures. But standing in this warm church surrounded by people who were becoming friends, dancing with a man who made her heart race, she found her answer had changed. "I think I am living it," she said softly. "I wanted to matter, to make a difference. I wanted to be more than just someone's seamstress or someone's burden. Here I am a teacher. I am shaping young minds. I am part of a community. It may not be exotic, but it feels important." "It is important," Marcus said, his voice rough with emotion. "You are important to this town, to those children." He paused, then added quietly, "to me." Before she could respond, the musicians struck up a new tune, a slow waltz, and Marcus held out his hand. She took it, and he drew her onto the floor, one hand at her waist, the other clasping hers gently. They moved together in perfect rhythm, and Dahlia felt as if they were the only 2 people in the room. "I need to tell you something," Marcus said, his face close to hers. "I have been trying to find the right time, but there never seems to be a perfect moment. The truth is, I have felt drawn to you since the day I picked you up at the stagecoach. You looked so lost and brave at the same time, stepping into the unknown. And every day since, I have found myself looking for excuses to see you, to talk to you. I know you came here as a replacement for Alina, stepping into her role, but Dahlia, you are no substitute for anyone. You are everything I did not know I was looking for." Her breath caught, and she felt tears prick her eyes. "Marcus, I feel the same way. I have been trying to tell myself it was too soon, that I barely know you, but the truth is I think about you constantly. When something happens during the day, you are the first person I want to tell. When I see something beautiful, I wish you were there to see it with me." He stopped dancing, right there in the middle of the floor, and cupped her face in his hands. "May I kiss you?" "Yes," she breathed, and he lowered his mouth to hers in a kiss that was gentle and tender and full of promise. Around them, she was dimly aware of people cheering and clapping, but she did not care. All that mattered was this man and this moment, and the feeling that she had finally found where she belonged. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Marcus was grinning like a fool. "I suppose the whole town knows now." "I suppose they do," she said, and found she did not mind at all. They stayed at the dance until late, wrapped in each other and the joy of new love openly declared. When Marcus walked her home through the snow, he held her hand the entire way. At her door, he kissed her again, slower this time, deeper, until she was dizzy with wanting. "I should go," he said reluctantly. "But I will see you tomorrow, Christmas dinner at the Mitchells. I will be there." "Good. I would not want to spend Christmas without you." After he left, Dahlia floated into her small room and lay down on the bed, too happy to sleep. She thought about how drastically her life had changed in just a few short weeks. She had come to independence expecting to simply take over Aliner's job, to live out a quiet existence teaching school in a small mountain town. Instead, she had found a home, a purpose, and against all odds, love. Christmas Day was joyful and chaotic, spent with Sarah Mitchell's large extended family. Marcus arrived with a gift for Dahlia, a beautiful shawl he had commissioned from a Paiute woman who lived in the valley. It was woven from soft wool and dyed in shades of blue and green that reminded her of mountain streams. "It is too much," she protested, but he wrapped it around her shoulders and told her it was not nearly enough. She gave him a book of poetry she had brought with her from Sacramento, inscribing the inside cover with a line from Elizabeth Barrett Browning. "I love thee with a love I seem to lose with my lost saints." He read it and pulled her into his arms, not caring who saw, and kissed her until she forgot where they were. The winter passed in a blur of happiness. Dahlia taught her students and grew to love them fiercely. She formed deep friendships with the women of Independence, particularly Sarah, who became like a sister to her. And she fell more in love with Marcus with each passing day. He courted her properly, despite the fact that everyone in town considered them practically engaged already. He took her on sleigh rides through the snow-covered mountains, wrapped in blankets and pointing out the places he wanted to show her come spring. He brought her small gifts, a piece of quartz crystal he found while checking his cattle, a bird's nest fallen from a tree, wildflower seeds to plant in the schoolyard. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. He told her about his family back in Ohio, his mother who wrote him letters he treasured, his brothers who could not understand why he chose this hard life in the mountains. She told him about her parents, killed in a ferry accident when she was 20, about the loneliness of living with her aunt who saw her as an obligation rather than family. "You are not alone anymore," he told her one evening as they sat by her stove, his arm around her shoulders. "You have me and I am not going anywhere, promise?" she asked, half joking, half serious. "I promise," he said solemnly. "Dahlia, I want to marry you. I know it has not been long and maybe people will say we are rushing, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. You are who I want to build a life with. You are who I want beside me through all the years ahead." "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, Marcus, I will marry you." He kissed her then with such passion that she felt it in her bones, a claiming and a promise all at once. When they finally broke apart, both flushed and breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "I do not have a ring yet. I will need to order one from San Francisco, something worthy of you. I do not need a fancy ring, she said. I just need you. But he insisted, and 2 weeks later, a simple gold band arrived with a small sapphire set in the center. He proposed properly on one knee in the snow outside the schoolhouse, and she said yes again with tears streaming down her face. They were married in early March, just as the first hints of spring began to show in the valleys below the snow line. The entire town turned out for the wedding at the church, and Sarah helped Dahlia make a dress from ivory silk she had ordered specially. Dahlia wore wildflowers in her hair, the first brave blooms of the season, and carried a bouquet of the same. Marcus stood at the altar looking like he might burst with happiness, and when she walked down the aisle on the arm of Dr. Henderson, who had kindly agreed to stand in as her father, she saw tears in his eyes. Their vows were simple but heartfelt. Marcus promised to love and cherish her all the days of his life, to support her dreams and stand beside her through whatever came. Dahlia promised the same, her voice strong and clear, feeling the absolute rightness of this moment. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Marcus kissed her with such tender joy that the congregation erupted in cheers. They walked back down the aisle together, husband and wife, ready to begin their life together. The celebration afterward was lively and long. There was food and music and dancing, and Dahlia felt dizzy with happiness. As evening approached, Marcus swept her up into his arms, making her laugh, and carried her through the snow to the boarding house where he had taken a room for their wedding night. "Tomorrow we will go up to the ranch," he said, as he set her down inside the warm room. "But tonight I want you all to myself with no distractions and no interruptions." "I want that too," she said, suddenly shy despite everything. He came to her slowly, giving her time, and cupped her face in his hands. "I love you, Dahlia Norwood. I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me, choosing this life." "I could never regret it," she whispered. "You are everything I did not know I needed." Their wedding night was tender and sweet and passionate, a discovery of each other that left them both breathless and amazed. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, Marcus stroking her hair while she traced patterns on his chest. "Are you happy?" he asked. "I am more than happy. I am complete." The next morning, they loaded a wagon with Dahlia's belongings and made the journey up into the mountains to Marcus's ranch. The trip took most of the day, climbing steep trails still partly covered in snow, but Dahlia did not mind. Every mile took them higher into country so beautiful it made her heart ache. Marcus's cabin was indeed small, just 2 rooms really, but it was sturdy and well built with a stone fireplace and real glass windows. It sat in a meadow surrounded by pine trees, with a view of the valley below that took her breath away. "It is not much yet," Marcus said, watching her anxiously, "but I will build you a proper house, something with multiple rooms and a real kitchen." "It is perfect," she said honestly. "It is ours, and that makes it perfect." They spent the next week alone together, learning to be married, learning the rhythms of sharing life with another person. Marcus showed her the ranch, introducing her to his horses and the small herd of cattle that were just beginning to come down from the high country. He taught her to ride properly, laughing when she proved to be a natural. "You were meant for this life," he said as they cantered across the meadow together, her hair flying behind her and her face alight with joy. "I think I was," she agreed. "I just did not know it until I found you, but reality intruded too soon." Dahlia needed to return to independence for school, and Marcus had work to do on the ranch. They agreed she would continue teaching, at least for now, living in the schoolhouse during the week and returning to the ranch on weekends. "It will not be forever," Marcus promised as he took her back down the mountain. Once I get the ranch running better, we can hire someone to help, and you can decide if you want to keep teaching or not." "I do not want to give it up entirely," Dahlia said. "Those children need me, I know. And I would never ask you to give up something that matters to you." The spring term passed quickly. Dahlia threw herself into teaching with renewed energy, and her students flourished under her attention. Emma Mitchell, the oldest, showed particular promise in mathematics and writing. Little Lucy Chen learned to read with a hunger that reminded Dahlia of herself at that age. Even the Henderson twins settled down enough to learn their lessons. Marcus came to town every Friday to collect her, and they spent weekends at the ranch working side by side. He was building a proper barn for the animals, and she helped whenever she could, learning to hammer nails and saw boards. She also planted a garden near the cabin, putting in vegetables and the wildflower seeds Marcus had given her. At night, they made love with increasing confidence and passion, learning what pleased each other, building intimacy that went beyond the physical. They talked about their future, about the children they hoped to have someday, about the life they were building together. Summer came in full glory, and when school let out in June, Dahlia moved to the ranch full-time. Marcus had been right about the beauty of the mountains in summer. The meadows were carpeted with wildflowers in every color imaginable: purple lupine, red Indian paintbrush, yellow buttercups, and dozens of varieties she could not name. The streams ran clear and cold with snowmelt, and the sky was so blue it seemed impossible. They worked hard during those long summer days, Marcus tending his cattle and Dahlia managing the garden and the cabin. She learned to cook over the fireplace, bake bread in the Dutch oven, preserve vegetables for winter. It was hard physical work, but she loved it. She loved the satisfaction of a good day's labor, of creating a home with her own hands, and she loved Marcus more with each passing day. She loved watching him work, all lean muscle and focused concentration. She loved the way he always kissed her good morning and good night. She loved how he listened when she talked, really listened, like her words mattered. She loved the way he touched her, with reverence and passion and deep affection. In late July, Dahlia began to suspect she might be pregnant. Her monthly courses, always regular as clockwork, were late. She felt tired in a way that was different from simple physical exhaustion, and certain smells that had never bothered her before suddenly made her nauseous. She waited another week to be certain before telling Marcus. One evening, as they sat outside watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and pink, she took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "I think we are going to have a baby," she said softly. Marcus went completely still, his eyes widening. "Are you certain?" "As certain as I can be without seeing a doctor. All the signs are there." He let out a whoop of joy that echoed off the mountains and swept her up in his arms, spinning her around until she was dizzy and laughing. When he set her down, there were tears streaming down his face. "We are going to have a baby," he repeated, as if trying to make it real. "Dahlia, we are going to be parents. Are you happy?" Happy does not begin to cover it. I am overwhelmed. I am terrified. I am more grateful than I have words to express. He dropped to his knees and pressed his face against her stomach. "Hello, little one. I am your father, and I promise to love you and protect you every day of your life." Dahlia ran her fingers through his hair, her own eyes wet with tears. A year ago, she had been alone and despairing, believing she had nothing to look forward to but a life of lonely drudgery. Now she had a husband she loved desperately, a home that filled her with joy, and a child growing inside her. The transformation was so complete, it sometimes took her breath away. They made the trip down to Independence the next day so Dr. Henderson could confirm the pregnancy. He examined her thoroughly, and pronounced her in excellent health, due to deliver in early February. "You will need to decide about teaching," he said kindly. "Some women continue into their 6th or 7th month, but winter travel in the mountains while pregnant could be dangerous." Dahlia and Marcus discussed it at length. Finally, they decided she would teach through October and then take a leave of absence until after the baby was born. The town council agreed readily, hiring a temporary teacher to fill in during her absence. Those months teaching while pregnant were bittersweet. Dahlia loved her students and would miss them, but she was also eager to focus fully on preparing for the baby. She and Sarah spent hours together, Sarah sharing wisdom from her own pregnancies and helping Dahlia sew tiny clothes and blankets. Marcus was attentive to the point of being overprotective. He worried constantly about her making the trip up and down the mountain each week. He worried about her lifting anything heavy. He worried about her getting enough to eat, enough rest, enough of everything. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she finally told him in exasperation. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I will be fine." "I know," he said sheepishly. "I just cannot help it. You are everything to me, Dahlia, you and the baby. I do not know what I would do if something happened to either of you." She softened and took his hand, pressing it to where the baby was starting to show. "We are both fine, strong and healthy and safe. I promise to be careful, but you have to trust that I know my own limits." He agreed, though she could see he still worried. But his anxiety came from love, and she could not fault him for that. October arrived with the first hard frosts, and Dahlia taught her last day of school until after the baby came. The children gave her drawings and poems, and Emma Mitchell had organized a surprise party with cookies and cider. Dahlia cried as she hugged each student goodbye, promising to return in the spring. "The baby will be lucky to have you as a mother," Emma said solemnly. "You are the best teacher I ever had. I know you will be just as good at being a mother." Back at the ranch, Dahlia settled into a slower routine. She still helped with light chores, but Marcus insisted on doing anything strenuous. He had hired a young man named Tom to help with the cattle over winter, which gave him more time to spend with her. They used the long winter evenings to finish preparing the cabin for the baby. Marcus built a beautiful cradle from pine wood, sanding it until it was smooth as silk. Dahlia sewed a soft mattress and blankets. They cleared space in their bedroom for the cradle and talked endlessly about names. "If it is a boy, I want to name him after my father," Marcus said. Michael James Norwood. "And if it is a girl, I thought maybe we could use your mother's name." Dahlia felt her throat tighten with emotion. "Her name was Deanne Rose." "Deanne Rose Norwood," Marcus said softly. "It is beautiful, perfect." December brought heavy snow, and they found themselves snowed in for days at a time. But Dahlia did not mind. She felt safe and content in their warm cabin, watching the snow fall while Marcus read to her from the books she had brought or worked on carving toys for the baby. Christmas was quiet, just the two of them and Tom, who joined them for a meal of roasted chicken and vegetables from Dahlia's preserved stores. They exchanged small gifts. A new shawl Marcus had ordered for Dahlia, a leather-bound journal she had bought for him to record the ranch's progress. "This time last year we were at the Christmas dance," Marcus said as they lay in bed that night, his hand resting on her swollen belly. "I was so nervous asking you. I thought you might say no." "I could never have said no," Dahlia said. "Even then, I think some part of me knew you were going to change my life." "You changed mine," he said. "Before you, I was just going through the motions, building the ranch because I thought that was what I should do, but not really knowing why. You gave me purpose. You gave me a reason for all of it." The baby kicked strongly, making them both laugh. "I think someone wants to join the conversation," Dahlia said. "Soon," Marcus said, kissing her belly. "Soon, little one. We cannot wait to meet you." January passed slowly, the last month of pregnancy feeling endless. Dahlia was uncomfortable and impatient, ready to meet their child. Dr. Henderson made the difficult journey up to the ranch twice to check on her, pronouncing everything progressing normally. "It could be any day now," he said during his second visit in late January. "Or it could be another 2 weeks. Babies come on their own schedule." The baby decided to arrive during a snowstorm on February 7th. Dahlia woke in the early hours with cramping pains that quickly intensified. Marcus, who had been sleeping lightly for weeks in anticipation, was instantly awake. "Is it time?" "I think so," she gasped as another contraction hit. He sprang into action, building up the fire and heating water while Tom rode through the darkness and snow to fetch Dr. Henderson from Independence. Dahlia tried to stay calm, breathing through the contractions the way Sarah had taught her, but as the pains intensified, she found herself gripping Marcus's hand so hard she was sure she was leaving bruises. "You can do this," he kept saying. "You are the strongest person I know. You can do this." Dr. Henderson arrived an hour later, snow-covered and breathing hard. He examined Dahlia and nodded approvingly. "You are doing well. It will be a few hours yet, but everything looks good." Those hours were the longest of Dahlia's life. The pain was beyond anything she had imagined, waves of it that left her gasping and crying out. Marcus never left her side, holding her hand, wiping her face with cool cloths, murmuring encouragement even when she snapped at him in frustration. Finally, as dawn was breaking and the snow was beginning to clear, Dr. Henderson told her it was time to push. Dahlia bore down with all her strength, praying for it to be over, for the baby to be healthy, for everything to be all right. And then, after one final tremendous effort, she heard the most beautiful sound in the world, her baby crying. Dr. Henderson held up a squalling, red-faced infant and announced, "It is a boy, a healthy, strong boy." Marcus was sobbing openly as the doctor cleaned the baby and placed him in Dahlia's arms. She looked down at her son, at his tiny perfect features and shock of dark hair, and felt her heart expand in a way she had not known was possible. "Hello, Michael," she whispered. "We have been waiting for you." Marcus leaned over them both, one arm around Dahlia and one finger clasped in the baby's tiny fist. "He is perfect. You are perfect. I love you both so much." The days after Michael's birth were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Dahlia learned to nurse, to change diapers, to function on far less sleep than she had thought humanly possible. Marcus was an attentive father, walking the baby when he cried at night, changing diapers without complaint, staring at his son with wonder. "I cannot believe we made him," he said one evening, holding Michael while Dahlia rested. "He is part you and part me, but also entirely himself. It is miraculous." "It is," she agreed, watching her husband and son together. Her heart was so full it almost hurt. When Michael was 3 weeks old, Sarah made the trip up to the ranch with Emma to meet the baby. She brought food and gifts and spent the day helping Dahlia with practical advice. "You are a natural mother," Sarah said, watching Dahlia nurse Michael with practiced ease. "I knew you would be." "I was so scared I would not know what to do," Dahlia admitted. "But somehow you just figure it out." "That is motherhood," Sarah said with a laugh. "A lot of figuring it out as you go." Spring came slowly to the mountains, but when it finally arrived, it was glorious. The snow melted to reveal the first green shoots, and the meadow began to fill with wildflowers again. Dahlia took Michael outside every day, showing him the mountains and the sky, telling him about the world he had been born into. Marcus finished the new barn and began making plans for a larger house. "We need more room," he said. a proper parlor and a bigger kitchen, and another bedroom for when the baby needs his own space. And maybe, he added with a grin, a few more bedrooms for the brothers or sisters who might come along. One at a time, Dahlia said, but she was smiling. The idea of more children, of filling this beautiful place with life and love, appealed to her greatly. In April, Dahlia returned to teaching, bringing Michael with her. She had worked out an arrangement where she would teach 3 days a week, with Sarah watching the baby during school hours. It was not ideal, but it allowed her to continue the work she loved while still being present for her son. The students were enchanted with baby Michael, and Dahlia often found herself with a circle of children during lunch, all wanting to hold him or make him smile. Emma Mitchell was particularly smitten, and Dahlia suspected she might have a future babysitter once Michael was older. Life settled into a new rhythm, busier and more complex than before, but deeply satisfying. Dahlia taught during the week, spent weekends at the ranch with Marcus and Michael, and found herself happier than she had ever dreamed possible. 2 years passed in a blur of joy and growth. Michael grew into a sturdy toddler with his father's green eyes and his mother's dark hair. He was curious and fearless, exploring every corner of the ranch under his parents' watchful eyes. Dahlia continued teaching part-time, finding fulfillment in shaping young minds. Marcus expanded the ranch, adding more cattle and beginning construction on the larger house he had promised. And in the spring of Michael's 2nd year, Dahlia discovered she was pregnant again. This time, she felt more confident, knowing what to expect. The pregnancy was easier than the first, and in December, she gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah Deanne, honoring both her friend and her mother. Sarah was a calmer baby than Michael had been, content to observe the world with solemn blue eyes. Marcus was utterly besotted with his daughter, carrying her everywhere and singing her silly songs that made Dahlia laugh. "You are absolutely shameless," she told him one evening as he danced around the cabin with Sarah in his arms, singing an off-key lullaby. "She likes it," he protested. "Look, she is smiling. She has gas. She is smiling because her father is entertaining. I will not hear otherwise." Dahlia shook her head, grinning. Watching Marcus with their children filled her with such profound love she sometimes could not catch her breath. He was everything she had never dared hope for. Loving, devoted, present in every way that mattered. More years passed, each one adding to the tapestry of their life together. The new house was finished when Michael was 4 and Sarah was 2. A beautiful 2-story structure with a real kitchen, a parlor with glass windows that looked out over the valley, and 4 bedrooms. Dahlia cried when she walked through it for the first time, overwhelmed by everything they had built together. The ranch prospered, growing to 200 head of cattle and requiring 2 additional hired hands. Marcus proved to be an excellent businessman, shrewd but fair, and soon he had contracts to supply beef to towns throughout the region. Dahlia taught until Sarah started school, then decided to focus full-time on the ranch and their family. She did not regret the decision. Teaching had been important to her, had helped her find her place in independence, but her priorities had shifted. She still maintained close friendships with her former students, particularly Emma Mitchell, who was now a young woman of 20, engaged to marry the son of the town's blacksmith. In the summer of 1883, 7 years after Dahlia had first arrived in Independence, she found herself pregnant again. At 30 years old, she felt older and wiser than during her previous pregnancies, more confident in her ability to manage. This pregnancy was more difficult than the first 2. She was tired constantly, and the baby seemed to sit differently, making even simple tasks uncomfortable. Dr. Henderson, now in his 60s but still practicing, monitored her carefully. "Everything looks fine," he assured her during one visit. "Some pregnancies are just harder than others. Rest as much as you can." Marcus was, if possible, even more protective than he had been with the first pregnancy. He hired a woman from town to help with the household work and would not let Dahlia do anything strenuous. She chafed against the restrictions but knew he acted from love. Their third child, another son they named Daniel, was born in February of 1884 during a relatively mild winter. The birth was long and difficult, and afterward, Dr. Henderson told them frankly that Dahlia should not have more children. "Your body has given you 3 healthy babies," he said gently. "But another pregnancy could be dangerous. You need to be careful." Marcus held Dahlia close that night, both of them looking at their newborn son. "3 is perfect," he said. "We have been blessed beyond measure. I do not need more children, Dahlia. I just need you." "I feel the same," she said. "Our family is complete." And it was. Michael, now 7, was responsible and kind, already showing an interest in ranching. Sarah, at 5, was bright and imaginative, constantly making up stories and drawing pictures. And baby Daniel, with his shock of red gold hair so different from his siblings, was a joy from the start. The years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their children. Michael learned to ride and rope alongside his father. Sarah started school and proved to be an excellent student. Daniel grew from baby to toddler to little boy, keeping everyone on their toes with his endless energy. Dahlia and Marcus grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. They still made love regularly, though perhaps less frequently than in their first passionate years of marriage. But what they had now was better, Dahlia thought. It was a love built on deep knowledge of each other, on shared struggles and joys, on the life they had created together. They had their struggles, of course. There were years when the cattle market was bad and money was tight. There was the terrible winter when they lost half their herd to a late blizzard. There was the summer when Michael broke his arm falling from a horse, and the terrifying week when Sarah had pneumonia and they feared they might lose her. But they weathered every storm together, supporting each other through the hard times and celebrating the good ones. And there were so many good times. Watching their children grow, expanding the ranch, traveling to San Francisco for their 10th anniversary, and staying in a fancy hotel where Marcus looked uncomfortable in a suit, and they laughed until they cried. On their 15th anniversary in March of 1891, they stood together on the porch of their house, looking out over land that was truly theirs. Michael, now 16, was down in the valley checking on the cattle with the hired hands. Sarah, 14, was inside helping Daniel with his schoolwork. The mountains were green with spring, dotted with wildflowers, and the sky was the impossible blue that Dahlia had learned meant perfect weather. "Do you ever think about that day?" Marcus asked, his arm around her waist. "When you stepped off that stage coach in the snow, looking like you might bolt back to Sacramento at any moment." "I think about it often," Dahlia admitted. "I was so scared, so alone. I thought I was coming here as a temporary measure, just filling in until something better came along." "I knew the moment I saw you," Marcus said. "I know that sounds ridiculous, but I looked at you standing there in the snow and something in me just knew. This woman matters. This woman is going to change everything." "You told me that night that I was not a substitute," Dahlia said softly. "That I was everything. Do you remember?" "I remember. I meant it then and I mean it now. You came through snow as a replacement, stepping into a leaner's shoes, but Dahlia, you were never a substitute for anyone. You were and are completely yourself, unique and irreplaceable. You are everything I never knew I needed. Lover, partner, friend, mother to my children. You are my whole world." Dahlia turned in his arms and kissed him, deep and sweet, tasting 15 years of love and devotion. When they broke apart, both smiling, she cupped his face in her hands. "And you are mine," she said. "My love, my life, my home. I came here expecting nothing but a job, and you gave me the world. Our children, this ranch, this community. But more than anything, you gave me yourself, and that is the greatest gift I could ever receive." They stood there together as the sun set behind the mountains, painting everything in gold and rose and purple. Inside, they could hear their children laughing, and in the valley below, the cattle lowed contentedly. This life they had built together was not always easy, but it was good. It was real. It was everything. Over the next few years, their children continued to grow and change. Michael became a skilled rancher, working alongside Marcus with increasing responsibility. At 19, he began courting Katie Sullivan, the daughter of a neighboring rancher, and Marcus and Dahlia watched with satisfaction as their son fell in love much the way they had. Quickly, completely, and with absolute certainty. Michael and Katie were married in the spring of 1895, in a ceremony at the Independence Church that reminded Dahlia so much of her own wedding. She cried watching her son pledge his life to the sweet-faced girl beside him, remembering the scared seamstress who had stepped off a stagecoach 19 years earlier, never imagining she would someday be mother of the groom. Sarah, now 18, had decided she wanted to be a teacher like her mother once was. She was working at the independent school, apprenticing under the current teacher and preparing to take over when the elderly woman retired. Dahlia could not have been prouder. And Daniel, at 11, was still trying to figure out where he fit in the world. He loved the ranch but also loved books and learning. Dahlia suspected he might be the one to venture beyond Independence someday, to see more of the world than these mountains. "That is all right," Marcus said when she voiced this thought. "We gave them roots and wings. Now we have to trust them to use both wisely." In the fall of 1896, Marcus turned 46 and Dahlia turned 42. They were no longer young, both of them showing gray in their hair and lines around their eyes. But Dahlia thought they had aged well together, their faces telling the story of a life well lived. Michael and Katie welcomed their first child that November, a daughter they named Elena after Dahlia's cousin. Holding her tiny granddaughter, Dahlia felt the circle complete in a way she had not expected. Elena had died so long ago, making room for Dahlia to come to Independence to find Marcus to build this life. And now there was a new Elena carrying forward the legacy. She would be so happy, Marcus said, watching Dahlia with the baby. "Elena, I mean. She loved you and she would be so proud of the life you have built here." "I hope so," Dahlia said. "I wish I could have known her better, that she could have seen all of this." "She sent you here," Marcus said simply. "In a way, she gave us all of this. We owe her a debt we can never repay." They stood at the window of Michael and Katie's small house, watching snow begin to fall outside. 20 years had passed since Dahlia had arrived in Independence through the snow, scared and alone and uncertain. Now she stood with her husband, her son and daughter-in-law, her granddaughter, and her heart was so full of gratitude she could barely contain it. Over the next few years, the family continued to grow and thrive. Sarah married a young lawyer who had moved to Independence from Sacramento, and they built a house in town near the school where she taught. Daniel, true to Dahlia's prediction, left for college in San Francisco when he was 18, though he came home every summer and Christmas to help on the ranch and visit his family. Michael and Katie had 2 more children, giving Marcus and Dahlia 3 grandchildren total. The ranch continued to prosper, and Marcus gradually turned over more responsibility to Michael, content to step back and enjoy the fruits of decades of hard work. In 1903, Dahlia and Marcus celebrated their 25th anniversary. Their children organized a surprise party, filling the big house with friends and family from all over the region. Dahlia walked through rooms full of people she loved, people who had become family over the years, and marveled at how rich her life had become. Late in the evening, when most of the guests had gone home and the grandchildren were asleep upstairs, Dahlia and Marcus slipped outside to the porch. The night was warm, full of stars, and the sound of crickets filled the air. 25 years, Marcus said, pulling her close. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime, and sometimes it feels like yesterday. I know what you mean, Dahlia said, resting her head on his shoulder. I can still remember exactly how I felt that first day stepping off the stagecoach. I was so certain I had made a terrible mistake. And had you? It was the best decision I ever made. Coming here led me to you, to our children, to this life. I would not change a single moment of it. Not even the hard parts, the winters we struggled, the times we fought, the scares with the children's illnesses, not even those, she said firmly. Because those moments made us stronger. They taught us we could survive anything together, and they made the good times even sweeter by contrast. Marcus kissed the top of her head. I love you, Dahlia Norwood. I have loved you since the moment you stepped into my life through the snow. You were meant to be a temporary replacement, just filling in for Alina, but you became so much more than that. You became my whole world. And you became mine, she said. My cowboy who smiled and saw me for who I really was, who told me I was not a substitute but everything, who gave me a home and a family and a love I did not dare dream was possible. They stood there under the stars, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. 25 years of marriage, 3 children, 3 grandchildren, a successful ranch, deep friendships, and a love that had only grown stronger with time. As the years continued to pass, Marcus and Dahlia settled into a comfortable rhythm. They were grandparents now, enjoying their grandchildren while leaving the day-to-day parenting to Michael and Katie. They traveled occasionally, taking trips to San Francisco to visit Daniel, who had become a successful lawyer. They spent long evenings on their porch, watching sunsets and talking about everything and nothing. In 1908, they celebrated their 30th anniversary quietly, just the two of them, with a simple dinner and a night alone in the house. Their children had wanted to throw another big party, but Marcus and Dahlia had insisted they preferred something intimate. 30 years, Dahlia mused as they lay in bed that night, wrapped in each other's arms. We have been married longer than we were alive before we met. Strange to think about, Marcus agreed. I cannot really remember what my life was like before you. It feels like you have always been there. I feel the same way. Sometimes I try to imagine what would have happened if I had not come to independence, if Alina had not gotten sick, if I had stayed in Sacramento. But I cannot picture it. This is the only life that makes sense to me now. Maybe it was always meant to be, Marcus said. Maybe every decision we made, every path we took, was leading us to that moment when you stepped off the stagecoach and I saw you for the first time. Maybe it was always meant to be you and me. I like to think so, Dahlia said. I like to think some things are just meant to be. They made love that night with the slow tenderness of long familiarity, knowing each other's bodies as well as their own. Afterward, as they drifted toward sleep, Dahlia felt profound peace. This was her life, this man beside her, these memories they had created together, this legacy they were leaving through their children and grandchildren. The years rolled on, bringing new joys and inevitable sorrows. They lost friends to age and illness. Dr. Henderson passed away in 1910, and Dahlia wept at his funeral, remembering how he had delivered all three of her children and cared for her family for decades. Sarah Mitchell, her dear friend, died in 1912 after a long illness, and Dahlia felt as if she had lost a sister. But there were joys, too. More grandchildren arrived, and then great-grandchildren. Daniel married a woman from San Francisco and brought her home to meet the family, and she fit in beautifully despite her city upbringing. The ranch continued to thrive under Michael's management, growing beyond anything Marcus had imagined when he first started it 40 years earlier. In 1915, Marcus and Dahlia celebrated their 40th anniversary. They were both showing their age now, Marcus moving more slowly with arthritis in his knees, Dahlia's hair completely silver. But they were still together, still in love, still grateful for every day they had. 40 years, Marcus said, echoing their conversation from a decade earlier. Nearly half a century together. The best years of my life, Dahlia said. Every single one of them. They were sitting on their porch as they had so many thousands of times before, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. The ranch spread out before them, prosperous and beautiful, a testament to everything they had built together. I came here through snow, Dahlia said softly, almost to herself. Scared and alone, thinking I was just a replacement for someone else. But you saw me, really saw me. And you told me I was not a substitute, that I was everything. Do you know what that meant to me, to be seen like that, to be valued like that? You were everything then, Marcus said, taking her hand and bringing it to his lips. And you are everything now. You were never a substitute, Dahlia. You were always exactly who you were meant to be. My wife, my partner, my love. The mother of my children and the grandmother of my grandchildren. The person who turned a cabin in the mountains into a home. The woman who made my life complete. Dahlia felt tears slip down her cheeks, but they were happy tears. I love you, Marcus Norwood. I have loved you for 40 years, and I will love you until my last breath. And I love you, he said. Always have, always will. As the sun set and the stars began to appear, they sat together in companionable silence. 40 years of marriage, a lifetime of memories, a legacy that would continue through their descendants. From the scared woman who had stepped off a stagecoach into the snow to the content grandmother sitting on her porch, Dahlia had traveled a remarkable journey. And every step of it had been worth it to bring her here, to this moment, with this man beside her. Inside the house, they could hear their family gathering. Michael and Katie had come for dinner with their children. Sarah and her husband would arrive soon with theirs. Even Daniel had made the trip from San Francisco with his wife and young son. The house would be full of noise and laughter and love, 3 generations celebrating together. But for now, in this quiet moment before the celebration began, it was just Dahlia and Marcus. 2 people who had found each other against all odds, who had built a life and a love that had endured for 4 decades. 2 people who had started as strangers in a snowstorm and had become everything to each other. "Shall we go in?" Marcus asked eventually. "I think I hear Daniel's voice." "In a moment," Dahlia said, not ready to leave this peaceful interlude. "Let me just look at this a moment longer. The mountains, the ranch, our home. I want to remember this exactly as it is right now." Marcus squeezed her hand, understanding without words. They had been doing this for 40 years, communicating in the shorthand of long married couples, knowing each other's thoughts before they were spoken. Finally, they stood together, Marcus helping Dahlia to her feet with the gallantry he had always shown her. Hand in hand, they walked into their house, into the warmth and noise and love of their family. This was what they had built together, not just a successful ranch or a beautiful home, but a family that would carry their love forward into the future. That evening, Surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, Dahlia looked across the crowded room and met Marcus's eyes. He smiled at her, that same smile he had given her 40 years ago when he told her she was everything, and she smiled back. No words were needed. Everything they felt, everything they had been to each other, was contained in that look. As the evening wound down and the family began to leave, promising to return soon, Dahlia and Marcus stood at the door waving goodbye. When the last wagon had disappeared down the road, they turned back to their quiet house, ready to end the day as they had ended thousands of days before. Together, they prepared for bed slowly, moving through the familiar routine. Marcus banked the fire while Dahlia braided her silver hair. They climbed into bed, the same bed they had shared for 4 decades, and curled together naturally, fitting like pieces of a puzzle. "Happy anniversary, my love," Marcus murmured into her hair. "Happy anniversary," she replied, her hand over his heart, feeling its steady beat. Outside, the mountains stood eternal under the stars, and the wind whispered through the pines. Inside, 2 people who had lived a lifetime together drifted toward sleep, secure in the love they had built and the legacy they would leave behind. From replacement to everything, from strangers to soulmates, they had traveled the journey together. And they would continue together, for whatever time remained, treasured partners in a love story that had begun in snow and would endure beyond their years into the memories and hearts of all who knew them.